for the year. We've traditionally done these in the form of road shows. In other words, we take them on the road around the state. So we've done these in every corner of the state for the past few years with the cooperation of Attorney General Dustin McDaniel, who's been very helpful and supportive along with his staff in putting these things on and spreading the good word about the Freedom of Information Act. You're going to hear a lot about the Freedom of Information Act here this afternoon, so get comfortable because we've got some experts here that are going to be able to tell us all there is to know about the Freedom of Information Act. If you haven't done so at this point, I would ask that you silence your cell phones and paging devices and other things. I've been asked also that if you are going to tweet or use Twitter from here, that you use hashtag FOIA Forum, hashtag FOIA Forum. And I'm assuming those of you who do tweet will know what that means. Okay, our agenda is we're going to hear from the Attorney General here in just a minute, and we're going to hear from some others in a panel discussion on a couple of different panels. We're going to hear an explanation of the FOIA from staff, from the Attorney General's staff, and it's going to move right along, so just get comfortable, as I said. At around 2:45 or 2:50, we will take a break. We'll have some soft drinks, water, and so forth brought in outside up here in the lobby, so that'll be available for you at that time also. So that being said, I think that wraps up. Normally I would give a little bit of a history of the FOIA, but we've got somebody here that knows a heck of a lot more about the history of the FOIA than I do, Brenda Blagg, who will be introduced here shortly. But for right now, it is my honor, my privilege, my pleasure to introduce to you a man who needs very little introduction in this state, Attorney General of Arkansas, Dustin McDaniel.
Hashtag Tom Larimer rocks, so we'll be sure and include that. You know, I have to say that this is a bittersweet moment for me in that it is my last Freedom of Information Act roadshow performance since becoming Attorney General. It has been quite an interesting experience for me, and one that I sincerely hope that my successor carries on with. You know, the Press Association, the Broadcasters Association, and all of the local agencies and universities that have been, and state agencies, of course, that have been partners in these roadshows have just been really extraordinary. And I have to say that there's been a real evolution in people's attitudes about them since they began. When we first started this in '07, and I don't know, we've done 20, 25, I don't think we've made 30, but it seems like a lot more than that. All over the state, from one end of Arkansas to the other over the last 8 years. There was real, I think it's fair to say, animosity towards some of the things that we were telling local officials that they were required to do under the law. We got an awful lot of pushback and heard things like, well, gosh, we've never done that before, and my city attorney doesn't tell me that I have to do that. I'm not doing that unless I get sued and a judge tells me I have to do that, that kind of thing. And over the years, we have noticed the attitudes substantially evolving to where we had rooms filled around the state with local officials, school board members, elected officials, local press, and the attitude became much more about, I want to comply with the law. I want to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm confused about what I'm required to do and what's the right way to handle things. That's a big shift, and that's a really good thing, and it's something that I attribute not to myself, but to our combined efforts of going out and reaching people, educating them, and sharing with them information about this act. I had in my office a couple of weeks ago a State Department delegation of Middle Eastern leaders. I guess one would say they were public officials, rising leaders in Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And they wanted to know specifically about the Freedom of Information Act. And they asked, isn't it burdensome to have to respond to all of these requests all of the time and to have people looking in on what you're doing all the time? And I said, yes. And you can quote me on that. The Freedom of Information Act is a burden, but it is also the price we pay to live in a free society. And it is the most important accountability measure that we have ever had in ensuring that what is done with the people's money, in the people's name, and on the people's behalf is actually done with transparency and in a way that there is true accountability. I understand those local officials that have one guy who just cannot stand the mayor, and all he or she does all day long is generate lengthy Freedom of Information Act requests with 19 subparts that whenever they are either complied with or are rejected, they get resubmitted in rearranged form the next day. Yeah, that's a burden. And I have had not a single legislative session, Brenda Blagg, that I haven't had legislators come to me going, we ought to make it against the law for that guy to keep submitting that stuff. And we have never done that, because if you make it impossible for one guy, even an abusive pesterer of government to have access to the information that is there, then you have effectively shielded everybody. You will hear, again, I'm sure, much better history from Brenda than I could ever give you, and I bet you've been told once and you'll be told 1,000 more times that for Governor Paul Rockefeller, this was what he believed to be the greatest element of his legacy as governor, the Open Records Act. You should be pleased and proud that Arkansas has resisted the temptation that other states have had to substantially erode and undercut our Freedom of Information Act, filling it with exemptions such that you take away the real meat of the coconut. And yet ours is complicated. Since I've been Attorney General, we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 335 Attorney General opinion requests on one act. A quarter of the AG's opinions that I have signed since becoming AG, you'll note the careful wording there, I didn't write them all. And even though the headlines always say McDaniel opine or McDaniel says, there's not enough hours in the day for me to have written them all. I've read them all, and I've edited most of them. But a quarter of them dealt with one act. So it's very appropriate that each of you took time to come and be here. I want to thank you from whatever motivating force brought you, whether you are a public employee and someone in your agency thought it was a good idea for you to come, whether you are a citizen who would like to know more about your government, whether you are a journalist who wants to ensure that transparency works for all. Whyever you are here, I appreciate you taking time to be here. I really want to thank all of the people who have worked so diligently to put it together. That includes, of course, in my office, the Chief of Staff, Erica G., and Press Secretary Aaron Sadler, Communications Director Cindy Murphy, Public Affairs person Sarah Gibson, and you will hear from Assistant Attorney General Ryan Owsley. We're using technology this time to try and reach more people with greater ease. We've done a pretty good job of filling up this theater. This is the first time I've been in here. I think Tom and I agree this is the most luxurious and opulent location for a Freedom of Information Act seminar. It also seems to be fraught with the greatest napping peril of any Freedom of Information Act seminar locale that I have seen yet. Dim lights and soft chairs and dark shadows. You are on your honor, especially if you are on public time, to stay awake. You will hear from, I think, some of the best experts in the state. Beth Walker is an extraordinary resource, and even though Attorney General opinions are limited to legislators and other very limited public officials, you can always call us. And so to the online viewership and anyone else who happens to see this, don't hesitate to call the AG's office. We will be happy to give you whatever direction that we can anytime we can. it is important, and it is something that allows people to have faith in the integrity of their government. And I appreciate all of you taking time to be here, and I appreciate very much Tom and the Press Association for being our diehard partner. It will be up to you to get the next Attorney General to do the same thing. Thank you, and enjoy.
I was remiss in my opening remarks to mention the FOI handbook. There were some at the registration table. I hope that you had or took the opportunity to glom onto one of those things. They can be very handy if you don't. If you've never used one, you'll see rather quickly it's a pretty handy tool. This is actually published by the Arkansas Press Association. Always quick to say, with the cooperation of the Attorney General's office. We're not attorneys, at least we don't practice law. But they do, and they are, and it's very helpful that they make sure that everything that we put in here is what it's supposed to be. There are also some there's some contact information in here available also if you have questions regarding the FOIA. And I will relate the story very quickly that when I first came to this job in 2004, we put a new one of these out. We put them out every other year with the cooperation of everybody you see listed on the front here, which includes the Attorney General, the Governor, the broadcasters, and on down the line. But I started getting calls at home around 9:30 at night from the Calico Rock City Council or the Hamburg School. Cell phone, reach me by cell phone. It is in there and available, but that's okay because we want everybody abiding by the law, and certainly we want them to be aware and concerned with compliance with the law. So anyway.